go. 10 seconds to go or something, but the stage is yours, Pavel, for the final or second to final hour of our first ever Connectathon.
Well, first of all, my deep sense of admiration to your enthusiasm, your energy, your support in the group, and Ferial, just take care of yourself, please. The world needs you, so don't overstretch yourself.
I'm really good, actually. I will totally rest after this. I really do listen to my being, and right now I don't know why I'm still good.
Anyway, thank you for being here, and thank you, team, for this amazing effort you're bringing forward. I was excited and energized by the last session we held about future of peace-based peaceful futures, and right now I want to expand this, and I think this might be seen in some regard as an integration of many topics that have been discussed throughout the last 22 hours. So I'm going to talk about the 100 years foresight or 100 years vision. So I think the vision, the word vision means something that sort of say, well, like visualize and it's out there. Foresight is more like a process. I feel that it's more proactive. Like we try to look into the future and we try to create that vision together. So I think this is what this story is about. So I want to bring forward to you some results of the process that has been happening in this domain for the last year and a half, and I feel that this is something to be treated as an invitation to continue doing this together, because I think that's part of the purpose of eco-civilization movement, is to create inspiring visions that can mobilize people around the world, catalyze change, bring forward communities of positive change and projects. So that's what I think we all aim to do together. And first of all, the question that I would like to pose to you is, how different may the world be in 50 years from now? Not 100 years, but just 50 years. So if we imagine people that lived in Europe 100 years ago, in early 1910s, this crowd that moves through streets of Paris cheering and going to the First World War. And fast forward to 1960s. What are those people thinking? How have their life changed? So in 1960, there are no empires. The world has seen nuclear bombing. There were two major wars, all kinds of revolution. Feminism came in. Internet and the computers came in. So just in 50 years, the life of our relatively recent ancestors has changed dramatically. And maybe some of your fathers and grandfathers are working in either of those crowds. So probably people in the next 50 years will look at our time and recognize how much has changed since we talk now. And when we talk about the next 50 to 100 years, what are the usual conversations? The usual conversations are about technology and its potential, how artificial intelligence is going to change our life, how we will have all kinds of new transportation, space exploration, robotics in our streets and in our houses. And the question, is that what defines our future? Is that what our future is going to look like? Is that what determines our prospects? And I would argue that there are much more important things that we need to take into consideration, and technology, like the dream of technological transformation, is more like an old and quite outdated narrative, because it's not really relevant to what we need to consider when we look into the next 100 years of our existence. But probably it will be part of our, let's say, landscape, but not the essential element of it. What is essential, first of all, to recognize that we are in a very turbulent time. And perhaps like people in early 1910s faced the situation with the First World War, and they did not understand that the world begins to change. Something similar is happening right now. We have already, we are seeing dramatic shifts, dramatic transformations because of the COVID pandemics, because of several military conflicts unfreezing old, like centuries old traumas in different parts of the world. And the transformation that probably will not go away anytime soon. We're probably stepping into decades of increasingly turbulent world where many of our existing social structures will just begin to crumble down and go away. And looking into the further into the future, of course, it's less about COVID, it's less about any other things that we're facing right now, but more systemic shifts that are coming our way because of the imbalances that exist in our society, primarily the ones related to our relationship with the planet. But it's not only about planet, because when people discuss the beneficiaries of climate crisis, they recognize that it's usually, let's say, 0.1% of the population of the world that really benefits from the climate change and gains opportunities by continuing the existing model, by continuing the exploitation of the planet Earth, by using non-renewable fuels and benefiting from that, and so on and so on. It's just, let's say, the outdated social structure that maintains all forms of injustice and crisis they are producing. And looking further into next, let's say, 50 to 100 years, we recognize how complex and threatening is the landscape of different challenges we are facing. And of course, climate crisis is most widely discussed, so I will not dedicate too much time discussing. Just wanted to highlight two things about it. One is that why climate crisis is so widely discussed, because it's going to affect very significant number of the human population in terms of their primarily their displacement, by primarily making places that currently are inhabitable non-inhabitable. And in the past, there were climate swings on our planet, maybe not as dramatic, not as the one we see right now, but they were quite serious. And usually human beings would migrate to like colder areas or warmer areas whenever needed. Nowadays, the whole world is populated. So that is a big challenge. Where do we move 2-3 billion people from tropical areas into, for example, Siberia or elsewhere? But it's completely, it's not really manageable. How do we go through that? And of course, we also recognize that climate crisis is not just a climate crisis. It's more like a combination of different tipping points, different systems that are connecting with each other and producing climate crisis. And probably the main aspect that is often kind of forgotten and put outside of the view when climate crisis is discussed is the fact that it's produced not by industries or airplanes as much as it produced by unhealthy practices of our relating with natural living systems. Because what really maintains the proper climate on planet Earth are living systems like forests, like ocean ecosystems. And there is a growing body of evidences from like sort of evolution of the Gaia hypothesis of Lovelock that indicates that different large regions on Earth, ecosystem there produce climate to maintain, for example, level of humidity, like tropical forest, rainforest. So if we indeed face the biodegradation and loss of biodiversity, what we are facing indeed is the destruction of the most essential element of the system that maintains our survival on the planet. And like speaking in egoistic terms. Or the life itself will not, let's say, be able to produce conditions conducive to life. If we're looking not from the perspective of human beings alone, but like from the biosphere perspective itself. So if bees go away or phytoplankton goes away, we are threatening the most essential elements or key species within ecosystem that maintain conditions for all life. And of course, many of you know the model of planetary boundaries, and it's constantly being updated, and they continue to measure to what extent human beings are exceeding the planetary boundaries, which are defined as boundaries within which the operation of our species on Earth is safe, and within which we can indefinitely or for very long time exist on this planet and for generations to come. So we can see everything is red here. So we violate almost every planetary boundary out there, and that's and I think that's what needs to be highlighted. We should stop talking about climate change or climate crisis alone, because that's not the most essential issue. What we need to talk about is the crisis of relationship with the planet, the violation of planetary boundaries and destruction of planetary systems. But of course, that's let's say again not in the discussion, not in the media. And the crazy machine of industrial capitalism just continues to carry forward. And there was some justification for this crazy machine, saying that, for example, which is quite true, that for example, hunger has been eradicated on for most of the human population, or opportunities have been increased for the majority of human population. But in fact, if we look at how this machine operates, it's really operating again in the benefit of very small number of our population. Let's say top 1%, but perhaps it's even a smaller percent. Like you can see, the majority of global wealth is held by just 0.01% of human population. And global poverty indeed has been decreasing, but in terms of absolute poverty, whereas relative poverty, the inequality has been increasing within and between countries. And this structure, the colonial structure of our economies and societies, has been with us for many centuries, but it's not viable anymore. We recognize that Asia is now leading the world in terms not only of economic economy that it creates, but also in terms of share of knowledge and new cultural artifacts and ideas. So the world is not Eurocentric anymore, and that's not yet recognized in our governance structures globally. And systems of productions, again, this is all very familiar to you, but I just want to remind that this is another huge issue, that they continue to reproduce inequality that is dramatic, and that is a source of a major tension, which will be redesigned within the next 50 years. It's inevitable, but usually such things are redesigned, so to say, through a major conflicts that are happening in different parts of the world. And as we recognize that lethality of weapons is going to increase exponentially, continues to increase, any future major world conflict can be the last one in the history of humanity. And even within our societies, we have major rifts. So there is an evidence, for example, that big countries like the US are facing very significant rift in positions between different parties, between different groups. This is just one of the representations of that isolation that starts to happen between communities, disconnecting from each other, going into their own communication bubbles, and really going into kind of cold civil war. This growing complexity of challenges and growing inability of governance systems to adapt to this complexity produces the opposite of smart solution. It starts to produce simplistic solutions. We can see the rise of populism all over the planet in the last 15 years, which produces incredibly inefficient and potentially humanity-threatening solutions. And populists are ruling or are present everywhere. And that is a symptom of what some people call complexity shock, the inability of human beings to grasp the challenges we are facing and just trying to go back to good old times, the golden age when things were nice. And elites are looking at a different solution. They say, okay, humans are not reliable, so let's create machines that will be reliable, will be able to govern this complexity. And we understand that this may represent even, let's say, as dangerous outcome for the future of human evolution as the thermonuclear war. To make humans into parts of a large machine, maybe not even recognizing that they're becoming just what some call algorithmic men or humans, the sensory organs of some large AI systems. And this idea that artificial intelligence is a solution, of course, is a belief, like almost a religious belief that probably will never be fulfilled. So last but not least, the idea that technological progress itself will continue and will provide solutions to our civilization for years to come is also being undermined. So what we see on one hand is that technological progress is increasingly decoupled from effects that it brings to population, to society, to individuals. And individuals and society are simply not able to catch up with the rate of progress. So they begin to question whether that is relevant to our life at all, whether that all science makes sense, whether that institution should be maintained. And within science itself, that's very rarely discussed subject, but it's another thing that is a very significant problem, that we are talking about limits to growth in relationship to our planet, but nobody actually talks about limits to growth in relationship to our knowledge. But there is a growing, let's say, a number of evidences that to increase our knowledge further becomes more and more costly. Like if we think about physics, for example, to gain new knowledge in physics 200 years ago, you just needed, let's say, a simple experimental setup that you can make in your own kitchen. Nowadays, you need to build up a huge device, such as Large Hadron Collider, which costs billions of dollars, requires collaboration of tens of countries, and so on. So there's a growing cost of knowledge, but also a declining number of breakthroughs. If we see it in fundamental sciences, from physics and biochemistry and other disciplines, everywhere the quality of research is declining. So we are facing a messy situation where environmental crises are coupled with internal crisis within our society and inability of our social systems to just maintain the social order and carry forward as they used to be. And if we try to kind of see how can we kind of represent this picture, if we just assign, let's say, the impact to these different challenges that are being anticipated and the probability that this risk will materialize, we will see a sort of tsunami of a negative impact rising with every year as we move into the next several decades of humanity. So this is what I'm calling the stepping into turbulent age, because the further we go, we'll go into 2030s, we will go into 2040s, we'll see more and more systems collapsing, elements of our society crumbling, and of course all kinds of conflicts and social rifts and social turmoils happening because of this. And that's where we probably should talk about time running out. But nobody takes care. And you have seen this metaphor before, I think, the idea of humans on the bus, but nobody actually taking the driving wheel, everybody just occupied with what kind of seat they're taking, while we all continue running into this brick wall. And that's what Margaret Mead called years ago, already 60 years ago. She named it the evolutionary crisis. And the idea of evolutionary crisis is that a species goes into a situation where it's in a grave existential danger, where its future is threatened. But she said 60 years ago, we are equipped with the consciousness of crisis as our new evolutionary device. Yes, we are equipped with that device, but probably insufficiently, because for the last 60 years, a lot has been done, but nothing major has been done to avert the direction of this, let's say, this bus going into concrete wall. So maybe before going further, let me ask you, and just maybe type your answers in the chat, or maybe tell me very briefly, do you think we can still be optimistic looking into next 100 years of humanity? And why can we be optimistic? Can we overcome this crisis? What are our chances? Robert, thank you. Bold, yes. What other choice do we have? I like this crowd, yes. Thank you. It's almost like a religious belief. Like, we don't know how, but yes, we can and we must. Yes, optimism is the best, of course. Yeah, Marilyn, I completely agree. And actually, I think we have a lot of opportunities to do it. Yeah, well, there's no I can see our team doesn't have any doubt. We have great zero chance of becoming the, yeah, absolutely. So, well, that brings enthusiasm to me as well. Thank you very much. And yes, we just need to say yes to survival and thriving. And well, part of the 100 years foresight is to say that we need to admit the seriousness of crisis where we are undergoing, and that we probably have not seen the worst yet. So what are those pathways into the future that we may want to explore? And I think the fact that we are here today discussing this possibility to change our ways, the fact that all of you are saying bold yes to the possibility of finding that pathway is actually making us all evolutionary agents. We are indeed part of that evolutionary transformation that is happening. I really like this metaphor represented by this painting called Paintbrush Warrior, who just invites, like, okay, I can paint the darker things, but I can bring my brush and paint a beautiful world. And that is the manifestation of something different. And that is our invitation. I think we are, in this group, we are part of the most exciting journey, one of the most exciting journeys that may have happened in centuries. And the fact that we are facing this greater turbulence, this increasing pressure from different forms of crisis, both internal and external, many people start talking about this as a symptom of transformation. And taken from the work of Ervin Laszlo, there is this idea of evolutionary leap. So he talks about two types of evolutionary processes happening in our society and in complex systems in general. So there is a more typical one is an evolution where there are some adaptations, adjustments. This is what he calls evolution 2, the Darwinian evolution, when there is like a darker color of a moth, a brighter color of a moth, but it's still the same moth. There are sometimes periods of history on our planet, including the history of life, when everything dramatically changed, when there is a big disruption that sort of pushes every being on the planet to change. And that is probably what we are facing right now, where we as a civilization go into that transformation, and biosphere around us goes into that evolutionary transition as well, and the whole planet is going into that. The question, where do we find pathways for new civilizational model. Again, I think finding them in technological solutions is secondary, if not a third rate, let's say, approach. And the priority lies with transformation of culture, governance models, our economic models, and most importantly, consciousness, our individual and collective consciousness. And that is what is going to redefine our future. And it's still a work in progress, and I think we will continue exploring this together, but we have identified 4 elements so far of what is that attractor, what is the future, the inspiring future that calls us. And one way of representing this as an acronym is REACH. It's REACH because it's going to be more complex, more abundant in possibilities, and more inviting. So the first element is regeneration, but regeneration not only in relationship to ecosystems, but also in relationship between people, reciprocity. Intelligence is meaning that we should not remove technologies from our life. They represent an important aspect of what helps us go into that complexity, but that is a matter of how do we design these technologies and how they are designed in the way that they are human and planet aligned, or human and planet centered design is used. They have to be increasingly complex, use non-linear approaches, network based, and so on, and holistic, supporting us human beings becoming whole people, our civilization being healed from traumas, and healing the trauma of maybe more than just human nature also, that has been traumatized over billions of years. So of course the regeneration is one big transition that is happening, and there's enough that has been discussed, so I will not go into this any further, but that's probably a big paradigm shift that we need to take care of, and it involves changing the worldview, our relationship with resources, the purposes of work of our economies, the ways we collaborate with each other, and so on. The good news that we receive from different explorations of the future suggests that actually we are already in the emerging wave of regenerative technologies and approaches. There is like hundreds of thousands of teams working across the globe on different elements of that future. So that's a positive news. The bad news is that it's not widely spread there. There's still mostly prototypes, small scale solutions. So the question is, how do we accelerate that wave of change? And probably we will see a lot of results of that acceleration in the next decades. But we also need to reassess our economies internally. So consumerism obviously is something that moves us to that dead end. So we need to find the new approaches, and probably that is also already happening. And younger generations are prioritizing transition to self-actualization, to dematerialized, let's say, ways of being, where consumption doesn't play so much importance anymore, but self-actualization does. And we need to encourage people to move beyond self-actualization, to recognize that self-actualization is only valuable if it's part of that greater serving. That is probably the next stage of evolution beyond the Maslow pyramid, which was sort of seeing self-actualization as the pinnacle, which is not. There are many beautiful, let's say, approaches already to start seeing how we can design our cities and our social systems through the lens of holistic thriving. And holistic thriving that brings ecologies where nature, humanity, and technologies are all factored into a system of global planetary thriving. And this is the work of Dark Matters Lab that are designing solutions for healthy cities with new holistic understanding of health as universal thriving. Very important aspect is to start become inclusive, recognizing the rights of non-human entities of different kind, including other species, but also other planetary systems like rivers, lakes, oceans, mountains, and so on. And how can we create that institution of planned citizenship? Because the citizenship idea, which we are using up till now, is absolutely exclusive. It prioritizes some groups over others. It excludes non-human beings from being citizens. So how can we make a new form of rights that are inclusive to everyone? That's probably is going to be the central discussion of legal system design in the 21st century. And two more things. So one is that to move to this future is we need to create systems that learn where humans can learn together to co-create that future, to get access to understanding of what is the future fit knowledge and skills. And some of you have been discussing this, accelerate use of these new solutions that are promoting that future, create collective visioning and so on. And we are talking about large populations affected by the current shifts. There are billions of people that need that new type of regenerative learning, and we need to create learning spaces that are able to cultivate that future. And that is, I think, the primary task for our groups and movements. And this is where the movements such as eco-civilization are so essential to begin weaving together all elements of this that are emerging out there, but need to be connected to really start seeing each other as elements of this new emerging paradigm. And most important, we need to encourage ourselves and others to become, to move from utopian visions, like there is some beautiful image in the future, we'll never reach it, but let's give it a try, to protopian, to say, oh, the future begins now and begins with us. And we need to become role models of that future society. And that is the bridge we're creating. We're creating it with ourselves, and therefore I completely agree that by saying yes to that evolutionary transition, we are becoming that transition. So that's all for the time being. As my provocation, so to say, to you, to encourage you think further about what is possible, what is achievable in the next 50 years to 100 years. I think what is ahead of us is either a big collapse or a massive, let's say, transition, emergence of a totally new form of existence. And that is our role to make it real. So the question is, how do we continue this work? How do we evolve this vision? What needs to be in that vision to bring it further? And how do we make it dominant? And I invite people to share. Please, Tim.
There you go. Thank you, Pavel. That fantastic. I look forward to rereading that presentation and really diving into deeper. Some really interesting slides there. But something that I really love was the idea of a protopian action. How do we act? What is in a protopian? What is the protopian action? What are the protopian actions? And I'd love to hear from you what you see them as. Like, what are the actions we take now, today, in our lives?
Well, I think that even communicating about this is already moving us there. When we model this way of being in our relationship to ourselves, to our partners, to our friends, to our communities, that's, to me, a part of that protopian action. So it actually begins with me seeing even my darker sides, let's say, as something that I need to acknowledge, to reintegrate, because I am the pathway to the future and I am the obstacle. I am the obstacle because I often lie to myself. I don't manifest the qualities I want to see in the world. So finding the way of acting that becomes genuine pathway, I think that's the number one protopian action for me. Robert, please.
Yeah, thanks, Pavel. So much richness in your presentation, and I love the rich the regenerative and the other parts you explained. So what my intuition tells me now, because, you know, we are going through this whole Connectathon process, and I sense into, if we talk about a possible collapse, so I'm not saying it will happen, but it's a possible scenario. So what comes up for me is, so how are we able to buffer this in-between phase? Because there will be a realignment phase, you know? And I think that's why, one of the main reasons why we are now connecting, because it feels to me like, sort of like a backup system that sort of can be there to buffer that phase and to sort of level things out. I'm not sure if you also feel it this way, but I felt like sharing it. And yeah, that's all great.
Thank you, Robert. And I think that's why I suggest we start seeing ourselves as a bridge. Not only because we manifest the future that is possible, but that is very important. Why is it important? Because it gives people hope. And I feel, for example, I'm doing that for Russian-speaking communities. Like everybody is devastated now because of the war, because there will be some significant collapse of the society, I think, very soon because of what is happening locally, and people start losing hope. And I think that's the role of many of us in our local communities, to convey the hope that there is something on the other side. That let's say the dark night will end, and let's carry forward to the end of the night and beyond. Violeta, please.
Hey, Pavel. Inspiring as always. A little provocation, actually, too. First, do you think we could just drop the questions what, why, and how, and just go into the emergence like the Mother Nature is doing, taking everything that is available and trying to do the best she can? Do you think that this is a possibility to shift our mind to, and our body and our soul? And the second one is that you're saying that we should expect the collapse on a global scale, but what about us? What's our role? Maybe we should engage not to collapse. And the second one, on a local level, do you think that will collapse too? What about us? Thank you.
Well, let me start with the second question. I think part of the story is something that I can see is happening in places like Russia, where the war, the relationship of people to this ongoing war for the last 6 months has been that they try to isolate themselves from it, like just pretend that it's not happening. And 2 days ago, mobilization was announced, and then people sort of woke up. Wow, the war is happening, and they're going to be affected, and they don't want to go into actually nobody wants to go into war. They were sort of seeing this as some people call it the football fan attitude. You're like watching from your seat, but you never engage. And I think there's something similar is happening when people are facing climate crisis or other crises that are very long term. So they think that they won't be affected, and they just prefer to take the position of bystanders and be alienated, isolated from it. And I think more and more people will receive different kinds of wake-up calls. And the role that we are holding, I think, on one hand, is to be that wake-up call to everybody, and also to create some kind of safety net, some kind of pathway forward, which assumes that we also need to learn how to be not just a network of intellectuals and inspiring leaders, but a network which practically can support each other whenever we need. And I think that speaking about regenerative networks, that's part of our role. And now going to your first question, I think that if we are that network, on one hand, we will operate as you described. There will be no 50 years plan with 5 years sub-plans to be implemented. It's ridiculous. It doesn't work. It didn't work. It never works. But to also not have a direction, I think is to miss a great opportunity of aligning our forces. So when, for example, all cells in our body move, there is some unified, let's say, direction of that's the condition of survival of a body, of an ecosystem. It's not just everything is chaotic in all directions. There is alignment, but it's not like everybody is directed as if in like communist regime to do exactly this and nothing else. That's my answer. So it's in the governance becomes more complex. It combines the hierarchy and the network, the emergence and the direction. And I think that's what we're learning to do. Thank you. I hope that answers your question, Feral, please.
So that's a great reflection, Pavel. So the word that comes to mind for me is resilience. And I say this because I think we need to brace ourselves. I think there is no way around it. And we can do all kinds of things for ourselves. And I think we should, as you've said, this network of people that we have a lot of wisdom. So we sit in rooms and we talk about this wisdom, and some of us and others are actually busy starting to do this. And I think this is what I realized for myself now is I'm literally wanting to just start doing it around myself. Because you said it, we're going to have to be in a way a lifeline, right, when the shit hits the fan, which means that we have to, if we're not putting on our life jacket, we're not going to be able to help. So in a way right now, some of our energy is going to have to be spent with designing our own resilience for when all of this is going down. And we know that some of it, we're not going to escape all of it, right? Perhaps we're not going to be eradicated, but we're already starting to experience a lot of it. And we're not immunized against that. We're actually going to go through it with them. But if we've put certain resilient things in place, or certain things that allows us to be more resilient, then we can survive it. And together we can, that's our key. We are preaching it. Now we got to start really living it, because together we survive this.
Yeah, and thrive. I think I really like your notion earlier that we need to not only create conditions for survival, but for thriving. Andy, please.
Yeah, just there was something so I'm probably one of the older people here, and I had an existential crisis last year. I discovered I had something that could have killed me, and by the way, it was technology that got me back from that cliff edge. So I'm tremendously indebted to technology. But I noticed something in the countryside that I go walking in. Scotland's famous for thistles. And last year I discovered this thing called thistledown. And what happens is you imagine all these beautiful thistles flowering, they're all purple and look great. But towards the end of the season, they go white. And what actually happens is this stuff called thistledown appears. And what it is, it's the older cells start to protect the seeds as the seeds are developing. And then eventually the thistle falls apart, and that thistledown, which is very light, actually carries the seeds across the fields and spread the seeds around. And I was thinking about Violetta's idea there. I think maybe we just have to accept that everything's got a time, and if we can protect the most valuable parts of what we've learned and help that be spread, then it will land hopefully somewhere at some fertile ground, and this journey that we're going to continue, rather than, as you say, try to have a 50-year plan and then a 25-year plan. Just protect and nurture the ideas and help them spread, and that's the best that we can hope for. Because, as I say, having an existential crisis, a real one, a mortality crisis, helped me realise that I'm not going to live forever. I'm not going to see that 50 years. I'll be lucky if I see 20 years. but I'm going to wake up every morning and do something, right? Valuable, protect, spread, share. And that's the thing that actually brings me back to the positive, right? That's the thing that makes life getting out of bed every morning worthwhile, thinking that I'm part of something that is valuable, that it is worth persevering with. So just a personal reflection.
Thank you, Andy. And I think that in terms of the work I'm presenting and the role I think it can play is that we look into really distant future, which is sort of beyond our lives, but something we can tune to be in service of today, not in like 100 years. It's not the future in 100 years will not happen at all unless we become manifestors of that future today and carry forward with that. So it's not really something we need to kind of, it's not a way to alienate ourselves from that. It's more like how do we reorganize our priorities, because a lot of people are just occupied with daily lives, which is reproduction of the existing model. And the existing model we know is outdated. And therefore, if we only focus on current priorities, we cannot see beyond that the possibility of a different paradigm rooting in and becoming a new way of being together. Donna, please.
That me? Yeah. Okay. Boy, this sure feels like the continuation of conversations that we've been having, and I'm sure for many of us here in whatever our circles are. And I'm always really appreciate the integrative and retrospective way that you pull all these things together, Pavel. Which is the result of accumulation of lots of years of things. And I think you described it really well when you said authentic action is important. And action, and I think we all realize that the action is not without cycles of reflection and learning and adaptation and I don't know, and let's go back and let's try it this way, all the while looking for ways to amplify and speed this up. And so I think some of the learning that we've all been talking about is that the place where anybody can engage is it's going to vary, and where people are on their journeys is going to vary. And so looking for ways to make it possible for people with their gifts differing wherever they're starting from, in ways that feel meaningful. Because if we don't inspire the human spirit and all of this stuff, all the wisdom and knowledge and science in the world, and as we're already witnessing, isn't enough to get enough of us on board, like the whole human spirit piece of it, which is why many of us talk about arts and culture and tapping into those things that tap the passion that people have, that get them out of that place of despair and apathy that, where, oh, it's too big for me. So what am I going to do about it? I'll just kind of wait this out, sit this out, or get as much out of life as I can under the circumstances. So we're talking meta, and some of what you presented there is very much a meta view. Not everybody will relate or easily grasp or even get access to that meta view. There's micro, on the ground, what can I do with my neighbors and my family and whatever. And then there's all the things that we talk about around connective tissue, how to connect these things, because none of it in and of itself is enough. And that's part of what I think we're recognizing, is that we need to find ways of connecting it and recognizing that it is going to be emergent. So we map, but we map without holding on to our maps too tightly, so that we can emerge. We don't get so fond of our own ideas and concepts. Because the future 100 years out, even as we might envision it, it won't look quite like that. But by golly, we're all envisioning something that, that will embody something that is what we want to shape. And maybe as long as we are on this earth, it makes life a little more meaningful, that wherever we are and however we operate, we're doing some things that make our own lives more meaningful and purposeful, while contributing in those little and in those big ways. That's a long sort of mouthful. I'm not saying anything that people don't know, but these are, I think, all the pathways that we're trying to create so that we keep saying and part of all of this journey is to get our world off the binary either or. What's the answer? What if if this doesn't happen, then it's this. I mean, it's not. That's the whole nature of the complexity. That's the dance. That's the ambiguity. And it's not easy. And on any given day, we wake up and we wonder what the fuck. And, and that's going to be part of the journey too, no matter how long we've been at it and no matter how knowledgeable we might be around some aspects of it. So if we can, and I'll stop there because then it starts to just be another soapbox. But thank you. That was helpful to hear you and hear everybody's wisdom. Thanks.
Thank you, Donna. And actually, Gavin, before I transit to you, just wanted maybe to invite people to share in after Gavin speaks, if you have some ideas about continuing the conversation for possibilities, inspirational visions, and pathways into emerging futures. I think that has to be part of our eco-civilization conversation, and I would like to maybe hear out what is your opinion? How can we carry this forward? Kevin, please, over to you.
Thank you. And Donna just said so much of what I wanted to express myself, so I'll make it a bit quicker. But I guess the two things that did stand out for me when I thought was one to speak to that balance of emergence as well, and particularly around holding space for the unknown. I know in my own life, this relationship between planning something that I've wanted to achieve years in advance because I've held long-term visions, and then achieving them without actually ever having been able to plot I would never have been able to imagine my path as it actually unfolded. It was always something surprising, something I wouldn't have imagined that took me to that next step. And that thing of just being willing to take the step you can see now, but holding that vision, always holding that vision is, I think, just such an important part of that navigation. And the second was that relationship between local and global that we were also all kind of speaking towards. I'm moving towards a little village here that is historically impoverished, but it has the most amazing setup of potential. But itself in South Africa, we've got a failed state. There's very little power to make things happen locally, but so much potential. But by connecting with groups like this that are international, we could form little overflowing wells, little, how it is, like you can only improve the world by overflowing your own capacities. And I think from us into our community and creating communities that are themselves empowered and overflowing can affect the next community and so on. But it has to happen both ways at once. It's just certainly where I sit, there's no way to do it alone, but we need an international thing just like this. And it's pretty amazing to see this come together and the resonance in ideas and characters and journeys. And Pavel, thank you so much for sharing. I wholeheartedly resonate with everything you put across.
Thank you, Gavin. Marilyn, please.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, everyone. And yes, I love the image, Andy, of the thistle in Scotland, because I actually live in Pintorn Eco Village in Scotland. So I see lots of those around here right now. But I would say in response to where to continue next, I would invoke my colleague Indra Adnan, who probably many of you know, and her call for us to go beyond the usual media, because I think these kinds of interconnections are absolutely vital, because they do transcend what we get fed through the media that is controlled by others. So I would say that it's really important, if we do think that optimism is better than the other possibilities, then we have to, I think, help keep each other optimistic, because I don't know about you, but there's days when my optimism gets seriously challenged. And when I can turn up with a group of people like this, I can feel it being inspired again, and I need that. And I'm willing to hopefully inspire a few other people along with it. So thanks, Pavel. It was a really beautiful presentation. I really appreciated the micro, the meso, and the macro of everything. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I think we're almost at the top of the hour. So thank you very much for your thoughts, your resonance, your invitation to go into the unknown and it really also resonates with me. I think the evolutionary pathway is not the pathway that is charted, like predetermined. It is an emergence in action, but also recognizing that we sometimes can step into evolutionary dead ends, kind of blind alleys, or even evolutionary traps where let's say the future is not just lost, and like to get out of the trap takes decades, takes incredible amount of energy. So as a human tribe, part of the larger planetary council of tribes of all kinds of beings on the planet, I think we cannot continue to experiment with trial and error just like that. We need to learn to do it in a different way, because we hold responsibility not just for ourselves. I mean, the cost of our experiments becomes higher and higher. That's what I also sense. That's why I think we need to find a smart way of combining the work that kind of invites us to dream and vision and create those attractors, and the work of emergence. So how do we balance that? Thank you very much. I think we're, yes, Tim. Yeah.
So no, brilliant, Pavel. I think that is a great way to sum things up, because in the next hour we are having our closing hour, and I think that is also time for bringing visions together. So on behalf of everyone, Pavel, thank you so much for this hour. It's very elucidating. I look forward to diving deeper into this in the weeks and months to come, and I'm now going to stop the recording.